the King of the Jews. How did he get there? Well, some combination of good connections and cutthroat competition and a competency for how to make his bosses rich. He fought for the throne he got, but then he had to kill to stay there. Clinging to power ultimately drove Herod literally crazy, caused him to lose everything, including his life. Nobody aspires to end up like Herod, but I imagine Herod didn't aspire to end up like Herod ended up. So how would we know if we were headed down that path? If you got a Bible today, go ahead and grab it and meet me in Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2 is where we're going to be today for part 3 of a teaching series we've called Backstage Christmas, where we're just looking through the first couple of chapters of Matthew's gospel and looking as he tells the story really from the vantage point of the backstage people whose primary role in the story is to shine the light on the star of the story. And really not just the star of the Christmas story, the star of the story that all of us are a part of. And so we'll be in Matthew chapter 2 today. If you're paying attention, obviously you know exactly how many days there are until Christmas. But if you're really paying attention, you know exactly what the number 324 points to. Anybody? Well, actually it goes both ways. If you think backwards, 324 is the number of days since Hobby Lobby and Cracker Barrel started decorating for Christmas. January the 27th seems about right. You know, it's good to take a couple of weeks after Christmas before you decorate for Christmas. That's their philosophy. That's backwards, but if you're thinking forward, 324 days from now, Election Day in America. Merry Christmas, everybody. Feels like the tension went up just a little bit. Let me tap dance on the tension tightrope for a second, if that's okay. Every once in a while I get emails from people or talk to people out in the foyer, either after a service or at some other point, and they want to make sure that I know that they either love or hate the fact that Doxology, in their words, never gets political. Which is cool. And actually, in some ways, they're 100% right. In some ways, they couldn't be more wrong. And you know this. Like, we live in a world right now where everything is political. It's virtually impossible to not get political. So we do try really hard to never be partisan as a church, and there are reasons for that. But the other side of that, like when it comes to that, we actually invest 52 weeks every single year to try to be the kind of people that are being developed as Christ-centered people that make a difference, who have a biblical worldview on everything that's happening around us, who trust and depend on the Spirit's guidance in our life for every decision that we make, every place that we go. And obviously that includes a voting booth. It also includes being sent overseas on assignment. Wherever we are, whenever we're there, we want to be the kind of people that are making a difference according to a Christ-centered worldview. And so we do that every single week, wherever we go. The American political system is one of the most brilliant experiments in all of human history, isn't it? If you can keep it, right? Your voice, your stewardship over that privilege really, really matters a lot. The way that you use your voice matters significantly in the world where we live. The vote that you cast matters personally, doesn't it? And in some ways, we could even argue matters spiritually. But it matters very little, and all of us know this, in the actual outcome of a national election, especially when you live in Texas, right? Or when it comes to the events that actually impact your everyday life, when it comes to your vote, it matters very little in those national elections. Now, local, state elections, it matters a lot more. Your vote counts for a lot more, and it probably impacts your everyday life a lot more. But even then, your voice, your vote is one out of hundreds or thousands in those kinds of elections. This morning, I want to talk about a vote that you'll cast actually today in an infinitely more important leadership decision than any local or state or national election. I'm going to talk about a decision that will impact your everyday life every day and how you respond in every single decision that you make every day. And the great news is yours is the only vote that counts in this specific leadership decision. There can't be election fraud or vote buying or tampering. Not going to be any kind of dangling Chad in this particular election. It's just you. And I'm guessing by now you already know which decision that is. And it is this: who is going to rule from the resolute desk of your life? When you get ready to make executive kinds of decisions about you, who's going to sit at that desk? Who's going to sit on the bench, the Supreme Court of your heart, when it comes time to make judgments about you? Who's going to legislate the laws that keep you in bounds or out of bounds when it comes to your life and the way you live? Or if you put all three branches of government together in a singular office or a person, this is the question: who will sit on the throne of your world? Last week we saw the first of two responses when it comes to a life that finds itself interrupted by Jesus. We saw last week Joseph. Joseph doesn't have a single line in the whole story, and yet his response to an interruption of Jesus sets the prototype for a life that responds. From that point on in Matthew's gospel, they all point back to him and the way that he responds as an example of how we should all respond. We saw it's a prototype, it's also a promise. It's a promise that when you choose, like Joseph, to live faithfully and respond gracefully and courageously in whatever God invites you into, it'll always be worth it for you. That's Joseph's example. There is another example in Matthew's gospel. Look at Matthew chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem and asked, "Where's the one who's been born, King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." If you ever happen to be around Doxology on a Wednesday night, either right before or right after the bridge, and you hear what sounds like the sounds of war, don't be alarmed. It's just 9 square. For the uninitiated, 9 square is like part volleyball, part 4 square, if you ever played that on the playground, part guerrilla warfare. The whole point of the game, you start outside of the square and you wait your turn to get in the game. And then when it's your turn to get in the game, you go into square one. Your only hope for staying in the game of 9 square is to take out the people in front of you, ahead of you. And the hope is to get to be the king by any means necessary, by alliances, betrayal, cheap shots, whatever it takes. You claw your way to the top, but once you're at the top, you have to kill to stay there. Because when you find yourself at the top, when you find yourself the king of 9 square, you find yourself right in the middle. And everyone from all sides is trying to take you out of where you are. claw your way to the top and kill your way to stay there. It's true of 9 Square. It's true of corporate America. It's true of junior high friend groups. True of your social circles. It's true of whatever you find yourself in the middle of or at the top of these days. Corporate America, junior high friend groups, 9 Square, and first century Rome. My guess is, however many times you've read through Matthew's account of the Christmas story, you never got to this point in the story and began to read and thought, Herod. Now that's a guy I can relate to. Which it turns out might be a problem if we're right about the kind of story Matthew's telling and the way he's telling the story he tells. Right, showing us 2 paths, 2 prototypes for how to respond when Jesus interrupts your story. There's the Joseph way and another way. Herod is pretty clearly a villain in the story. If you're not familiar with the history of Herod, it actually starts with his dad. His dad was a brilliant and actually a corrupt politician who just happened to make the right friend at the right time. He became friends with a guy named Julius Caesar just as the Roman Empire was rising to the top. And he worked a couple of personal political favors with Julius Caesar and got his son, 25-year-old Herod, appointed the governor of Galilee. And it turned out young Herod was good at all of the things that Rome valued. He was really good at pushing down revolution, and he was really good at increasing revenue. He would squash all of the people that were trying to take over Rome and overthrow Rome, and he would raise taxes on all of the people there in Galilee. Everything every company wants middle management to do. Squash the competition, increase profits. That's the kind of thing that gets you promoted in corporate America, isn't it? Well, it was the kind of thing that got Herod promoted from Galilee. Finds himself aligned with Julius Caesar, and then, you know the story, Julius Caesar is murdered. Brutus and Cassius. And Herod decides to align with Brutus and Cassius, like, hey guys, I'm glad somebody finally did what everybody knew needed to be done all this time, you know? But then it doesn't go well for Brutus and Cassius. Antony and Octavian overthrow Brutus and Cassius. And there's Herod standing up there before Octavian saying, gosh, yeah, I'm not going down with that boat. So Octavian, old buddy, old pal. And it works. And he gets promoted by Octavian to not just the governor of Galilee, he gets to be the king over all of Israel, or the king of the Jews. How did he get there? Well, some combination of good connections and cutthroat competition and a competency for how to make his bosses rich. He fought for the throne he got, but then he had to kill to stay there. He had 8 wives. All of them had sons. All of the sons thought that they deserved the throne. So he killed most of them. And most of their moms. There was a saying in Israel during those days, it was better to be one of Herod's pigs than one of his children. All the clawing and killing and clinging to power ultimately drove Herod literally crazy. It caused him to lose everything, including his life. Nobody aspires to end up like Herod. But I imagine Herod didn't aspire to end up like Herod ended up. So how would we know if we were headed down that path? Well, I think if you look at Herod's story, Matthew gives us 4 clues in the chapter. The first one's in the passage that we already read. Magi, they come to Herod. We don't really know who the Magi are. We don't really know where they come from. They probably weren't actual kings like the song says, but whatever they were, whoever they were, they had at least enough status to get an audience with the King of the Jews. Their news to the King of the Jews is that they're looking for the one who was born King of the Jews. And Herod has to be looking around when they come to him going, seats taken. And Matthew tells us, verse 3, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. The word disturbed, it means to be agitated, to be spun up. You could write the word anxiety there. Anxiety. Now, let me be careful. There can be biological reasons and chemical reasons and even circumstantial reasons like PTSD for a clinical kind of anxiety that's a lot more complicated than this. This may be included in that kind of anxiety, but what I have in mind is something a lot less complicated than that kind of anxiety. It's the kind of anxiety that a lot of us feel. It's that kind of anxiety where our mind and our soul and our spirit just feel like they're caught in a washing machine that's on the agitation cycle. You ever seen that happen? It's like going back and forth and left and right, up and down. A piece of clothing comes to the top and then gets squashed back down underneath. Your heart ever feel like that? Does that come into your heart this week with all the people that are coming to your house? Like all of the things that you've got to control and keep under control in order to stay in control of your world? Herod feels that. Why? Because he's on the throne of his world. And it sounds like someone else wants it. And maybe even has a claim to it. And even the thought of a claim to the throne that Herod fought for causes him to be all spun up trying to figure out how to hang on to control. It causes anxiety for Herod. And notice, all Jerusalem with him. Some psychology people here today, you notice this is family systems theory, isn't it? And anxiety, it's contagious. 2,000 years before Murray Bowen. So Herod invites a whole bunch of people to a Bible study. Look at verse 4. When he'd called together all the people's chief priests, notice the people's chief priests, not necessarily Herod's chief priests, and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. They say, Bethlehem. That's what Micah the prophet said. So look down at verses 7 and 8. Bible study's over. He calls a different meeting. And Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship. So notice he has a big public Bible study, right? He calls together all of the chief priests and the teachers of the laws, and he's like, hey guys, I've been doing a lot of thinking these days and praying and journaling a little about God's promises. And, when God sends his promised king that we're all waiting for, right guys, I wonder where he's going to be born. They say, Bethlehem. He's like, oh gosh, that's good insight. Yeah, never seen that. Write that down, Bethlehem. Public Bible study. Private, Matthew says, secret meeting with the Magi. When exactly did you guys see that star? Go check in Bethlehem. Keep me posted. Obviously, I'd like to worship him too, but hey, guys, let's just keep this between us. The chief priests know the where. The Magi know the when. Herod's the only one that knows both. And Matthew wants to make sure we know that he wants to keep it that way. And meanwhile, do you see, he leads both of them to believe that his heart is someplace that it's not. The teachers think he's curious, studious, that he values their insight. The Magi think that he's humble, he's hopeful, that he wants to join them in their worship. But he's acting. Anxiety, acting. He's pretending to be somebody that he's not in order to stay who he wants to be in public perception. He's living according to this carefully controlled image that varies from person to person, so that in each environment they see the him that he believes they want to see. Everybody in his life sees a version of him, but he makes sure nobody sees the whole him, except him and us in hindsight. And in hindsight, what we discover about Herod is that he's clothing all of this selfish motive with spiritual sounding language so that he can keep a tight grip on control while it looks like he's doing the exact opposite. Notice it's worse than not just telling the truth. It's dressing something other than the truth up like the truth, pretending like they're the same thing. Does this ever happen in your family? Does it ever happen in your community group? They see the filtered version of you, from successes to your struggles. But we don't let anybody in on the whole truth, the whole story, because that could be a threat to us keeping our position in their life, or at least in their eyes. So we give people in our life snapshots like we give the snapshots of Christmas cards. Poor Jason Mumford spent an hour with our family. 15 or 20 different poses, though if I'm being honest, it felt like a whole lot more than that. And every single pose, like his camera shutter is going, brrr. I think he took 1,000 pictures of us so that we could pick one. And it took an hour for him to get that one, and it took hours before the hour for us to get to the hour, picking out the right clothes, Carrie doing all of the work on that, picking the right environment, getting us all ready to go, showing up at exactly the right time so that we could pick the one picture and send a card that says, this is us. Don't judge us, you did it too. You do it too, and not just in Christmas cards. Nothing wrong with it for Christmas cards, right? Those things are expensive. I better look good in ours. But it's a problem when we do it with all of our life, because we're afraid of what people will do if we let them see more than just the carefully controlled image that we've chosen for each environment we show up in. And it all happens out of fear, doesn't it? And it's fear for Herod here. The priest might beat Herod to the baby and think that the baby's cuter than Herod. The Magi, they may let it slip that there's a king that's been born and get the hopes up of the people that Herod has tried to push down. So he manages his personal profile and his personal brand to make sure that they all line up with who he wants to present to the world wherever he is at any given moment. Because ultimately he needs them to think something of him so that he can stay in control. So he's acting. So anxiety and then acting. The third one is arrogance. And really it's behind the scenes in this whole backstage story, isn't it? It's the idea that the world around us is better served when the world around us serves us. My staff will be best served. They just do what I tell them to do the way that I tell them to do it when they tell them to do it, My kids will be best served if they just follow orders. Some of you, my boss would best be served if she would just do what seems so obvious to me. And arrogance is sneaky, isn't it? Because just like in Herod's case, arrogance doesn't usually declare itself in a moment. Hey, this is just my arrogance talking. In fact, when arrogance shows up and declares itself, it usually declares itself as the opposite of arrogance, doesn't it? As a boss, as a parent, I know me. I know my heart. I know what I want for me, and I know what I want for you. And I trust me with your life. So you ought to trust me with your life. I know what I can see. I know what I want. I know my heart. So if you just do what I say and trust me, it's going to go well for you. Your world, our world, it'll be best served if your world and my world will just serve me. Why do most people not want a boss like that? Why do most of us not want a parent like that? It's because you trust you, but they don't trust you. That shows us the other side of this, doesn't it? it comes to arrogance. Like, I know you can trust me. I know I can trust me. I know what I'll do with me. I know what I'll do for me. I know what I'll do to me. And I know what I'll do for you. Frankly, God, your presence here in my life is a little bit of an interruption. And look, I know you trust you, God, but I'm not sure I can trust you with me in this. So here's the thing, God, I'll talk to you. I'll listen to you. I'll read your book. I'll hang with your people. I'll show up at your program once a week. But I need to stay on the throne and not you. Herod's operating through this filter that says what's most important to me is what's most important for everyone. So he sends the Magi to Bethlehem where they find the toddler in a house, right? And they worship him, they offer him their gifts, and then they're warned in a dream by God to keep a secret from the secret keeper. And Joseph has a dream too. He's warned to flee to Egypt with the child, but nobody tells Herod anything. And Herod doesn't like staying in the dark. Verse 16. When Herod realized he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he'd learned from the Magi. Anxiety, acting, arrogance, and right furious. No, I'm just kidding. Right anger. 4 A's. Anxiety, acting, arrogance, and anger. Herod feels like his grip's starting to slip. And it flies out of him in destructive anger. The world he controls isn't under his control all of a sudden, and it makes him really mad. So he goes on a seek and destroy mission to eliminate anybody or anything who could remotely threaten what he's got under control. I have a friend I was talking with about this week. If you met her, you would think that she was one of the nicest, kindest, sweetest, tenderest, most compassionate people you have ever met in your life. No exaggeration. She said, I'm not. You'd be shocked at how angry I can get. Her kids were sitting there with her going, yep, that's true. But not just at them. She called herself, and I love this, a lazy perfectionist. She said, I have this need for my world, all of it, my house to stay clean, my kids' behavior to stay perfect. But so much of that depends on people other than me. When they don't do it perfectly, my kids don't do their chores perfectly, it drives me nuts. And it comes out of me in this self-righteous wrath. Because not only do I have to do it now when they didn't do it right, but it reflects to others, it reflects to my world that I'm not that control of my world. When my kids misbehave in public, a ton of my anger is not related to them. It's about the world's perception of me. And that sounds gross, doesn't it? And entirely relatable for almost any of us that are honest with ourselves. And I'll tell you, the fact that she was confessing that out loud in front of her kids, not for the first time, is an indication that she is an incredible mom, not just an angry one. Saying it out loud, she's got the anger, but saying it out loud robs it of its power. That's not what Herod's doing. Herod's exercising his anger to make it stronger. Anger, anxiety, acting, and arrogance. It's all right there in the story. So why all the detail on Herod's stuff? I mean, notice, we get a sentence and a half about the manger scene. We get a whole chapter about Herod. We get 7 verses about Joseph's prototypical response. We get 23 about Herod's response. Why? Why? okay, you know I love you. What's Matthew trying to do? Is it possible he's holding up a mirror to you? I know he's holding up a mirror to me. I wonder if he's holding up a mirror for you, to invite you to slow down and look closely and realize in the story that Herod is a guy that we can relate to after all. Anxiety, acting, arrogance, anger. What are those? Those are the default modes of a heart that is hell-bent on staying on the throne of its world, and that understands that Christmas is the initiation of a revolution. As much as Christmas is the announcement of peace on earth and mercy mild, it's also news about someone who wants to occupy the throne of our world, which feels like bad news to us. We fought our way to the throne we got. We've clawed our way to get to where we are, and we're quietly killing ourselves and the people around us to keep it all under control. We are quietly killing ourselves and the people around us to keep our world under control. Is it possible that the truth is we're terrible kings, and that the most kingly thing we could possibly do is to abdicate our throne and give it to a king who we and the people we love could trust more than us? Think of it this way: Herod clawed his way to power. Jesus emptied himself of power, came to the earth as a child, a baby who needed someone to change his diaper. He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. Herod killed to keep his spot. Jesus gave his life so that you could live it. Herod's way ends with weeping. Jesus' way ends in worship and hope and peace and life. So the question for you again this morning is this: who will sit on the throne of your world? And notice what Matthew's saying when it comes to the message of Christmas. Nobody's neutral. Nobody gets to be Switzerland when it comes to the matters of the heart. If you want to be the king and someone else comes along who wants to sit on the throne, one of you has to give in. And the thing about Jesus is this: he's not going to force you off the throne. He'll let you have it your own way. But he wants you to see what's at stake. So that's the question that Christmas requires us to answer. The most important vote you will cast today or tomorrow at any point next year. And nobody can cast the vote for you. Who's going to sit on the throne of your life? I want that to be a decision we don't just run past in the hurry of Christmas. So we want to give you a chance to respond. The worship team's going to come back out. Please don't bail for the parking lot quite yet. This is part of the message, this response part. We're going to sing some words that remind us of the story that we're a part of and declare that Jesus is the King of Kings. And perhaps in this moment, as you respond, it's a moment for you to respond like the Magi, to worship, to declare your allegiance. And maybe as you do that, you want to stand, or you want to bow, or you want to kneel like they did, or perhaps you just want to open your hands in a posture of release. Says it's all yours. Maybe to put your hands up in a sign of surrender, not a forced surrender by a hostile king, but by a king who loves you and wants what's best for you even more than you can see it, that says, the wisest thing I can do from here is to give you all the control. Whatever that looks like for you, nobody's expecting anything of you. No acting in a moment like this, right? You're free to respond to him, but let Christmas be more than a tradition. Let it be an abdication of the throne of your heart to the one who will lead you best from here. Would you bow your head with me? Lord, as we respond, We realize we've come into this moment as people who are filled with anxiety about all kinds of things. White-knuckling our way through life, trying to hang on to control. Lord, for some of us, it has made us self-focused. For some of us, it's made us angry. And for some of us, it's made us hypocrites that just act our way through every part of our story. Would you allow us today to relax? Would you let us today learn to rest? And would you let us, Lord, hand over the throne of our heart to one who will lead us better than us, the one who didn't consider equality with God something to be white-knuckled, but came to the earth and humbled himself and gave his life on a cross so that we could be forgiven, so that we could have hope, so that we could have a future, and so that we could know that it's true he rose from the dead and offers us life with him forever from here. Lord, for the person that's never received that gift, I pray that this morning with open hands, they would receive the gift that Jesus purchased for them. And for every single one of us who have received it, that we would live our life with open hands, trusting him in every moment of every step, faithfully, gracefully, courageously, to lead us through. This is our response to you, King of Kings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, thanks for watching. If something you heard resonated with you today, we would love to connect with you. Visit doxology.church/connect or leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed today's message and you want to see more, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos.